episode 247, Downward Facing Spiritual Spiral Podcast. My name is Eddie Cohn. I don't know why I'm laughing or smiling. Maybe I'm a little anxious, but everything is fine. All is well. I hope you're doing well. And I'm still trying to navigate how this podcast is going to unfold this year. It feels a little random as to why and or when I press record as one of my cats walks in. Today I want to talk about fear because it's a topic that I've really been thinking a lot about over the last few years, and how living in a state of fear may prevent me from trying new things, or living in that state of fear may cause me to not trust or have faith in people or in society, or hoping that things will turn out okay. And it's, I'm not naive here in the sense that obviously, having health insurance or car insurance is probably an appropriate add-on to your life. I think you should probably drive, the speed limit and not drink and drive. There's obviously sort of behaviors that make a lot of sense. And I think living cautiously is probably a healthy way to live in this world of ours. But hey, Nellie, my other cat's coming in. They want to say hi. But I think getting older, having a milestone birthday a year ago, it's really sort of made me want to recalibrate my approach or the way that I want to live, or it's made me sort of think back to how I have lived, and maybe that doesn't have to be me for the rest of my life. There's this incredible song by Tom Petty called Crawling Back to You. It's off of his record Wildflowers. And there's this line that I just really somehow I've embraced it as my mantra. And the line is, most things I worry about never happen anyway. And there's so much truth in that line. There's so much truth in that lyric. How much time do we ultimately waste worrying about something that never happens anyway? And I guess it's okay to worry or live cautiously. There's a rainstorm that I'll certainly talk about momentarily that's happening here in LA. And I think it makes sense to try and not go out as often as you can, or at least, drive slowly or carefully. We had some dinner guests over last night, and it was really raining hard at that moment. And, they could have decided not to come over because, they were worried about getting into a car accident, or when they left, we have the staircase outside, and it was obviously very slippery, and they potentially were at risk of slipping and falling. I guess you need to ask yourself, how often are you not doing something because you're scared? And some of your fears may be justified, but at what point does it get to this sort of level where you're not actually living your life? You are allowing fear to control the way you conduct yourself day in and day out. And it becomes unhealthy. Or it gets to a place where you're not living a full life. I guess as I had a birthday about a year ago, I just started to reflect back upon all the times maybe I could have lived more fully. Or I think back about moments where I allowed fear to prevent me from doing some things that I wanted to ultimately do. And I don't want that. I want that to not happen as often. I mean, I went on 4 vacations this last year. And that's something, I guess going on vacations, I know the word vacation sounds relaxing, but we try to go somewhere out of the country, or we try to explore new civilizations or areas in the world. And it's always challenging for me because it forces me out of my comfort zone. And I do it over and over again because I don't want to get comfortable. I want to challenge myself. I want to break the barriers a little bit. and this isn't sort of, pointing fingers at the way I was raised, but it does feel like this cloud of anxiety and fear sort of permeates in the genetic makeup of my body, my family. And I don't know if it's cultural. I don't know if it's probably a combination of culture, things that happened to my family over the years. But I don't want that fear and anxiety to control or distort the way that I look at the world. And again, I'm not denying that bad things don't happen. I'm not denying that something tragic doesn't happen every day. But I think we have to be careful that, if you're looking at the news every day or who you surround yourself with, how are they skewing your perception of the world? And I of course, have to talk about this storm and sort of what's gone on with how now the weather is being reported with these words like atmospheric river, bomb cyclone, to describe thunderstorms or rainstorms. And again, I'm not trying to poo-poo or belittle this rainstorm that's happening in LA. I have some friends that live in Topanga. A couple of them have been evacuated. So clearly, there's a real threat from this storm. But a friend of mine, messaged me a few days ago on Friday and just was saying, God, are you doing okay? And I wasn't being snippy. I said, what are you talking about? And his response is, well, I've been reading about this terrible storm in LA. And I have to say, today, Monday, and yesterday, Sunday, were easily the worst days of the storm, because as of Friday, really nothing had happened. And my response was, well, I don't know what you're talking about. And so he ended up sending a link to an article, and the words that are being used in these articles to describe these storms, I guess it potentially is heart-pounding. I mean, to see the words life-threatening, bomb cyclone, to describe this rainstorm is no wonder people are so traumatized. I mean, if the way that news and storms and weather, if it's reported in, and I could argue it's such a hyperbolic way, where we use the words life-threatening to describe them, no wonder people are reaching out to me to check to see if I'm okay. I guess I've gotten to the point where I've pretty much eliminated the news media from my periphery, my mental periphery, because, I'll listen to Bill Maher, and he's pretty critical of the news media, because it does feel like it's no longer just giving us information. There is this sort of intent to make people scared. And then what happens when people are scared? I mean, what are they... how are they changing their perception of the world, or how are they living? Are they living less fully if they're full of fear? It does feel as though there is this sort of subtle movement to make people scared. And I guess, look, a rainstorm certainly is life-threatening, but I guess everything we do is life-threatening, isn't it? I mean, just living at home, you could, having hardwood floors, one could argue, is life-threatening because they're slippery. Having a rug potentially could be life-threatening because you could trip over the edge of the rug, and then maybe you land headfirst and plant your head right into your television in the wall. I mean, at some point, isn't everything life-threatening? I still always find it interesting that cars are getting more technology added to the screens, and you can text and you can watch television and play video games on these screens. Yet there are really no articles about the destruction of cars and how life-threatening those are. And I don't want this to seem, anti global warming. I clearly believe that there's some serious destruction that is happening to our environment. But if the media keeps amplifying or describing these storms with these very hyperbolic words like atmospheric river and life-threatening and bomb cyclone, it certainly would make one feel like, oh my God, we've never had this happen before. But I guess growing up in Ohio and being around all these terrible snowstorms and rainstorms, whenever I see storms out here, they always feel I guess they pale in comparison. Like, it just feels sort of like it's no big deal. It's just another rainstorm. It's interesting how we take information in. How are you allowing this information to affect your perspective on the world? I want to read a little piece here from The Hill. I went online and saw that they are a bipartisan news publication, whatever that means these days. But this is written by Jeffrey McCall. I won't read the whole thing. Too many Americans live in fear today. Continued fear of COVID, fear of being canceled, fear of extremism, fear of the existential threats, fear of fear itself. Americans are fearful in large part because too many establishment media provide a constant drumbeat of frightful shadows that send news consumers looking for places to hide. Stories of woe permeate today's media messaging, seldom with nuanced reporting that puts threat in proper context. The news agenda on a micro level covers a variety of dreadful events and stories, but the macro message boils down to one headline: be afraid. Propagandists work under the assumption that people eventually believe what they hear most often. The constant hyping of a culture of fear has rhetorically scared otherwise reasonable Americans into irrational emotions and behaviors. Media appears to play a key role in this cultural disruption. The motivation is unclear. Seeking ratings hardly explains a preoccupation with the sensationalism of never-ending breaking news. One explanation could be that media executives are simply oblivious to the emotional carnage on the nation's psyche. Some of those executives are not known for their deep intellects or selfless concern for the national good. Purdue University President Mitch Daniels addressed the nation's fearfulness in his recent remarks to the graduating class. He told the graduates that many of the nation's elders failed a fundamental test of leadership during the COVID crisis. They let their understandable human fear of uncertainty overcome their duty to balance all interests for which they were responsible. Daniels noted that even before COVID, there were troubling signs that fearfulness was beginning to erode the spirit of adventure, the willingness to take considered risks. I feel like that's a really important reminder just reading that article. Just think a lot about what we're worrying about. And where does this worry come from? Is it in our genetic makeup? I'm always so envious and respect people that, travel to new and exciting places, that take chances, that just sort of have this carpe diem attitude about life. And it feels like those types of people there's less and less of those types of people. And again, this is not to be disrespectful. There's a lot of people out here in LA that don't live in homes, and clearly this rainstorm is going to make their life threatening. And I think people that live in the hills need to be very careful. I think people that are driving need to be careful. But then I ask myself, are our lives threatened every single day? What are we choosing to be worried about? What are we choosing to focus on? And it makes sense to be cautious, but when do we allow the worry and the fear to take over and we're not able to act reasonably, or we're not reasonably able to make decisions for ourselves? I'm so happy my friends last night took the risk in the rainstorm and came over, and we had dinner last night, and we had a wonderful discussion about life, and it was just a great night. And I have plans this evening to go to like this recovery lab. And I mean, yeah, if the rain is pouring down and we can't see, I mean, it might make sense to not go. But at what point do we not live our lives? At what point do we allow the media or these news stories to make the decisions for us? I guess I got to a point these last few years where I'm tired of allowing fear to ultimately make decisions for me or to distort my perception of reality. That is what fear is doing. Fear distorts our perception of truth. So, live with less fear. Carpe diem. And then, in those moments where you are making a decision or you're feeling that anxiety or fear take over, maybe ask yourself, why is that happening? Where is that coming from? What is triggering those emotions in your brain? And then decide is that a rabbit hole that you want to sort of come to terms with or figure out? Do you want to live a life with less fear? I would imagine you would, right? So, yeah, I'll leave you with that for today. You know where to find me on social at Eddie Cohn or the Spiritual Spiral podcast. I'm weighing where to take this show. Maybe create seasons. I can't decide if I want guests on still. It's complicated. I can't figure it out. I'm in the midst of recording a lot of music, so that's sort of taking my focus right now, but always appreciative of you listening. Please share the show with your friends, maybe write a review on iTunes. I'll be back soon, but as always, thanks so much for listening, supporting, being a part of the Downward Facing Spiritual Spiral podcast.